The Vietnam War is widely considered as one of the worst wars of the 20th century. It was a prolonged conflict lasting from 1960 to 1975, in which the U.S. intervened to prevent the spread of communism during the Cold War, and to support Vietnam's unification. There have been numerous debates about the war, with some arguing that it was primarily a political issue for Vietnam. They claimed that if Vietnam had become a communist country, it would not necessarily have resulted in the spread of communism worldwide, contrary to the domino theory. On the other hand, the U.S. believed that if Vietnam became communist, it would trigger a chain reaction, ultimately leading to the spread of communism around the world. The U.S. became deeply involved in the Vietnam War, partly to prove its global standing. However, North Vietnam emerged victorious in the end, and the U.S. was forced to enlist the help of friendly nations, such as Korea, to fight the war. The decision to send troops to Vietnam remains a contentious issue even today, as it had both positive and negative effects. For example, Korea achieved economic growth due to its participation in the war. But there were also negative consequences, such as the aftereffects suffered by soldiers and the massacre of civilians. So, from now on, we can learn about Vietnam War and Korea. President Park Geun-hye needed 600,000 soldiers to ensure that Korea remained an anti-communist country and to achieve economic growth. The issue of military expenditure made it difficult for the Korean government to promote a 5-year economic development plan, leading to the need for U.S. aid. However, the U.S. aid decreased for 3 consecutive years, from $383 million in 1957 to $222 million in 1960, leading to vulnerability in Korea's industrial production base and a high unemployment rate. As a result, the government established labor-intensive production bases and sent surplus farming labor abroad to lower the unemployment rate. The Vietnam War was the only way for Korea to earn dollars directly, as it had limited opportunities to obtain loans from international financial institutions. Korea, therefore, desperately needed the restoration of aid funds from the U.S. through the Vietnam War. Additionally, Korea was concerned about its security if the U.S. were to send USFK to Vietnam. Thus, Korea repeatedly requested to send Korean troops to Vietnam, but was repeatedly rejected by the U.S. until 1961. Korea would do its best to protect its security as a strong anti-communist country. North Vietnam has well-trained guerrilla troops, but Korea also has already well-trained million soldiers to prevent this kind of war. These soldiers have advanced military training as the regular army and have been dispatched to the South Vietnam region. If the U.S. accepts and is willing to support, Korea will dispatch its soldiers to Vietnam. If it is difficult to dispatch soldiers as regular army, Korea could consider recruiting volunteers. These actions by Korea can make an impression that liberal countries are unifying their actions with unified power to the world. However, when China started to support the Vietnam War, the U.S. asked Korea to dispatch soldiers to Vietnam. The Brown Memorandum was written, which promised not only military aid but also economic aid to Korea in exchange for Korea's soldiers being dispatched. There are several reasons why the U.S. requested this dispatching. First of all, Koreans look like Vietnamese, similar as same Asians. Secondly, the cost of maintenance for Korean soldiers was cheaper compared to that of the U.S. Thirdly, Korea has a superior effective strength of an army. In addition to money, Korea requested more from the U.S. The Korea-U.S. Mutual Defense Treaty requested that the U.S. automatically intervene in the event of an emergency on the Korean peninsula, sign an agreement on the status of U.S. troops stationed in Korea, and stop reducing U.S. troops in Korea. Since the 1953 Armistice Agreement, the Korean government has consistently requested these things from the U.S. The U.S. administration wanted to compromise to the extent that it could not automatically intervene. The status agreement of the garrison could be at the level of the Philippines, and that it could consult with the Korean government in advance when reducing U.S. troops in Korea. South Korea wanted to revise the treaty further to receive more compensation. The Park Geun-hye government proclaimed that Korea would participate in the war to support South Vietnam and liberty from evil communism, just like the U.S.'s appeal. However, behind this proclamation, Korea's true intention and strategic objective of intervening in the war were hidden. President Park tried to solve the devastated domestic economic problem in the mid-1960s and maximize financial gain through special procurement. Additionally, the president tried to secure profit through Korean companies and labor workers advancing into Vietnam at the government level. President Park asked for active cooperation from the U.S. to participate in the war to gain expansion of trade volume and secure an exporting market. In fact, Korea gained tremendous economic profit through the Vietnam War. In the first year of dispatching, 1965, Korea's export volume of products was $15 million. The highest trade balance in the 1960s. Korea, which was a country without proper production ability, found a way to overcome its trade and export problems after dispatching its troops. The trade volume exceeded $23,800,000, which was more than 4 times that of 1964's $6,300,000. After the Vietnam War, Korea recorded a 9% annual economic growth rate. President Park succeeded in the first economic development plan due to economic specialties caused by the dispatch of troops to the Vietnam War. And based on this, he was able to take power again. However, behind the remarkable economic achievements achieved by the dispatch of troops to Vietnam, there was also a dark side. Thanks for watching this video and don't forget to click the subscribe and the like button.